Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to be talking about another episode from Season 5. This is episode 16, The Elopement, written by Hindi Brooks and directed by Harry Harris. If you're enjoying these, please do hit like and subscribe. This episode shows the return of Chad Marshall, the forestry student, who we saw earlier in an episode called The Competition, where he sparked a competition between Erin and Merie Earle for the affection of Chad. He has now returned, and early on we see him running into John Boy along the road. John Boy's about to go pick up Erin from her job as a telephone operator, and Chad says that he would like to go surprise Erin by picking her up. We don't actually see him pick her up, but we do see him take her up to an area where he has bought a parcel of land where he plans to live and build a log cabin. Now, in the early narration, they talk about this being Erin's first real boyfriend. Well, it seems to me that we're into season 5. I thought she had a number of boyfriends before this, but perhaps she didn't, and I am misremembering it. But perhaps this is also her first serious boyfriend. The other plot line going on in this episode is that Ike and Corbeth and Amy are going to Doe Hill to visit Corbeth's relatives. And so Ike has initially asked John Boy if he will take care of the story because they trust him. John Boy is unavailable because he just has too much to do, but he suggests, since both he and Jason are on vacation from school, that and he knows Jason could use extra tuition money, he suggests perhaps Jason care for the store. But he promises, because Ike hesitates, that John Boy will also take responsibility for what goes on and keep an eye on things, because Ike isn't sure that he considers Jason a good business person. Super cute scene where Elizabeth is trying to teach Myrtle to speak. She said at one point when she gave Myrtle food and said, "Say ba," that Myrtle did. And so now she's trying to repeat that. And Jim Bog just basically says, "I think the goat just wanted to speak, and that you're not going to teach her to do that." But Myrtle is with us because Maude Gormley had given the goat to the Waltons when she kept running away from home. So we now have Myrtle the goat. We do see the reappearance of Maude Gormley throughout this episode, which is part of the storyline with what's going on at Ike's store. Maude arrives at Ike's store in the ice cart with the Iceman. And she goes into the store and she buys a number of packets of flower seeds and a number of small cans of paint, and then says, "Put it on my account." Now, Ike had told Jason not to allow any charging to any strangers or anything. Jason wonders about Maude, since she's not really a stranger, and Maude seems to say, "Oh yeah, Ike does that all the time." He later asks John Boy about it after Maude has been in and run up about $7 in tab charging. And initially John Boy says, "Oh, I'm sure that he's known Maude forever. I'm sure that's fine." When Jason actually speaks with Ike on the phone, and Ike says, "No, absolutely not. She owes $20. She has no idea how to handle money, and do not give her any credit." So Jason doesn't have the nerve to tell Ike that he's already done that. He discusses it with John Boy. John Boy feels terrible, says, "Well, it's going to come out of their pocket." John Boy says it's his problem. He will talk with Maude. Chad has elicited Erin's help to work on this log cabin, and he borrows from John this stone cart that is pulled by Blue and takes it up there. And it kind of looks like a sled. And they use it to gather stones and then bring them to help build the foundation of the cabin. And it is up here in that lovely setting that Chad tells Erin that he has been in love with her and he can't stop thinking about her all while he's gone. And he asks her to marry him. And she says yes. At one point, Erin and Chad are in the Walton living room and they are dancing to the radio, which just reminded me that people have asked about whether the radio actually played music. It did not. We never heard the music coming from the radio. So anything that we would have heard would have been either pre-recorded or would have been audio that they had pulled from someplace to use. It could be that they actually were hearing music at the time. We do then hear an announcer So it's just all kind of the way it's edited together at the end. And this is really cute because Elizabeth's trying to stay up and watch them, and she ends up falling asleep, standing up, which I think is quite a trick. When Chad and Erin come to the house so that they can talk to Mom and Daddy about wanting to get married, we are inside the house. So here we would have been on the sound stage. You see Olivia sitting in the living room mending a shirt, and then you pick up Erin looking through the window. So she would have been on the porch of the inside set, because there was a porch, a front porch on the soundstage in front of the living room set. So in this case, you don't see much beyond Erin and then Chad sort of looking through the window. They come along and they come into the door. So shot on the soundstage. When Daddy gets home and they actually do let them know they want to get married, the response is no. Erin is only 16. They want her to finish school. They feel that she is too young. She reminds them that Olivia was 16 when she married Daddy, and Chad is actually around the same age as John was when they got married. But they're not buying it. They feel that Erin needs to finish school, and this will give Chad and Erin time to get to know each other better, and they'll talk about it then. John Boy goes to the shed where he has his printing press and runs the Blue Ridge Chronicles. As he opens the door, you see this shot through the door. Now, this would have also been on the soundstage, but you can see what a good job they did of creating a backdrop, and then it's either real trees or something that's like closer to camera. So those give a real three-dimensional look and are real. So then they blend into that wonderfully painted backdrop that is behind. And because the blinds aren't up, you don't see out. So you just really see what is there right behind the door. Once he closes the door, we're inside that soundstage and inside that set there. So he hears Erin. Erin is upset about Mom and Daddy saying she can't marry Chad. And John Boy and Erin talk about his relationship with Jenny and how he really loved Jenny. And she says, well, if you were married, you could have gone with her, because he says Jenny had to go and I had to stay. But he recognizes that it just didn't work out for them. And then when they were away, it sort of faded. Erin doesn't want that to happen, but John Boy tries to tell her that if they're determined to be married, that they will find a way. I don't think he means what Erin and Chad ultimately think is the answer. Erin and Chad discuss it in this scene, which Harry Harris created, where they're actually walking along the bridge that is over Drusilla's pond, but you start off by seeing their reflection in the water as they're walking along and talking, and then of course the camera stops and pans up, and there they are. And basically, they are deciding that they are going to elope because they don't want to wait. John Boy goes to see Maude and breaks it to her that she owes $7.70 to Ike, and that if she doesn't pay it, then it's going to be up to John Boy and Jason. And Maude says, well, you boys don't have that kind of money. And he says, no, ma'am, we don't. She says, well, neither do I. And as she's trying to think of some solution, she says, well, maybe she does have something she can sell. And she brings John Boy into her painting room, where she has all these wonderful paintings that she's done of birds. And that's what all the flower seeds were for, because the birds like them and it attracts them, and then she's able to paint them. And she says that at some point, someone did buy a couple of them from her. So John Boy gets the idea that maybe they could put them in Ike's store and try to sell them. Now, people have asked me about various different paintings over the years. Maude Gormley's paintings in this case. Those were done by our art director, Ed Graves. And he could obviously paint and draw in all sorts of different styles, because he also did all of the artwork in the one with the painter that was obsessed with Erin, and which was a whole different style of painting. So very talented artist in his own right. Ike comes back and sees all these paintings in the store. And it's like, what is going on here? And Jason basically explains that they're Maude's paintings. And Ike thinks, who's going to buy these? And Jason says, well, there was a book salesman in here and he bought two for $5 each. So Ike's impressed, and clearly this also tells us that Maude was able to pay off the $7.70. That will be back in the till, and So there's no problem with the credit that Jason extended to Maude. Chad comes to pick up Erin so that they can elope. He gets the ladder out. Reckless, fortunately, doesn't bark and raise the alarm, and he puts the ladder up and climbs up. Now, the interior of Erin's and the girls' bedroom basically was on the soundstage. So when he's supposed to be at the window, he would have been just sort of crouched down on the soundstage floor outside that window. And then as Erin climbs out of the window, then we cut to the exterior of the house where she is actually now onto the real roof on the house on the back lot of the studio. So this was the way all of that editing went back and forth in such a seamless way that it feels like one continuous scene, and also like that house was really real. They first go to Reverend Caldwell, who is the local Methodist minister, who is a little surprised about why they are there. And he says, most likely because Reverend Fordwick would not have married you without your parents' permission, and neither will I. So their next option, they feel, is to go to the Justice of the Peace in Jefferson County. And now, fortunately, Reverend Caldwell goes over and tells John and Olivia, who take off to go and track down Erin. So in this case, we're on the front porch when they're talking to Reverend Caldwell. And as I looked at this, and you can see into the house, this was done on the back lot, because in this case, what you can see into the living room is not much. And we could see a little bit of that on the back lot where there wasn't the full living room inside there. But the giveaway for me is also that when they leave, you see John and Olivia, they go a few steps and then they turn right pretty much right away. Whereas in the actual house, when we're on the soundstage, they would have gone up a few steps. They would have been on that landing by Grandma and Grandpa's bedroom entrance, and then they would have continued up more stairs before they turned right. So those little telltale things tell me that we were on the back lot. At the Justice of the Peace, Erin is beginning to have second thoughts because it just is so unromantic. The witness is in curlers, and the minister, the Justice of the Peace, keeps mumbling the words and skipping ahead. And so she's like, I can't do this. And she and Chad step into another room to talk it over. Chad is very understanding and just doesn't pressure Erin at all. And in the meantime, John and Olivia arrive and they take them home. And John is understanding and kind with Chad. He doesn't berate him. He just says, come on, let's go. And so they all head off and head back home. And the end narration talks about that Erin went home and that she did spend her free time helping Chad build that log cabin. Now, we never saw any of this in subsequent episodes. We never saw Chad again, and there really wasn't much talk about what happened with that relationship. So another example of how with the Waltons, because each episode was basically a standalone episode, that we could assume any amount of time had jumped from between episodes. And so we didn't have to worry about all that direct continuity and constantly having to update and say, oh, Chad went away or something. So there was a lot of things that were never really explained. And we just asked our viewers to take a leap of faith and move on to the next story that the family was engaged with. A few side things. Once again, we have a wonderful vintage car. I'm not sure what it is. If anybody recognizes it, feel free to put that in the notes. I never got to drive it. There were all these great cars that came through that, unless you were involved in those scenes, you never drove the cars. Most of them were hard to drive because there was no power steering and they had tricky little quirks because they were vintage cars. I've had many of you ask me about Merie Earle, who played Maude Gormley with us for 15 episodes she was in. She was born in 1889 and lived to be 95. And so she was, I believe, into her 80s, well into her 80s when we worked with her, and just always knew her lines. Sometimes she would mumble, her lips would move as she sort of spoke other people's lines. I think part of remembering her cues. So sometimes I think they had to edit away from her because you could see her lips moving, but she didn't always do it. And she often closed her eyes when she spoke, another sweet little characteristic of hers. I believe she started acting later in her life. She did 16 episodes of The Tonight Show as a guest. Johnny Carson loved having her on. She was just funny. She was very much like what you saw on TV. You never knew what she was going to say. She had a unique perspective on life. She was sweet and fun, and we really enjoyed working with her. She never seemed to be afraid of anything. She just went along with things. She was just so game for anything, never complained, was always ready. So just a joy to work with. Of course, this was also the second appearance of Michael O'Keefe as Chad Marshall. He did a couple of episodes of the Waltons, did a lot of other television, and went on to do some rather significant films, including Caddyshack, and he was nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in the movie The Great Santini. He was in the series Roseanne for a number of seasons as the character Fred, and at one point he was married to singer Bonnie Raitt. Another surprise for you is I have recently been in contact with Michael, and he has agreed to come on as a guest in, and we'll do a little chat about his time on the Waltons, his life, his career. So look forward to that. And we're still trying to set a date and a time. So keep your eyes open for that. That should be coming up in the next several weeks. So until then, thank you very much for watching. And I will be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.